صل على محمد وآل محمد. Assalamu alaikum, brothers and sisters, for joining together again in this holy month of Ramadan. May Allah bless you and your families and your marhumeen, particularly after a all night of A'mal for Laylatul Qadr. Before we start the presentation, I just wanted to mention a couple things regarding safety, particularly in relation to the kids. Okay. Let's make sure that we're fully aware of where our kids are at all times during the program. Not just during the speech, but before and afterwards as well. Kids should not be unattended outside of the program, outside of the building. This is a safety issue. It would be horrible if something happened to a young kid. If there's cars coming and going. Also, we don't know. There could be people coming and going. Kids need to be inside the center. They cannot be outside without a parent with them. So please make sure that you are aware of where your kid is at all times. Also, in terms of upstairs, we have classes upstairs. Are there classes tonight? Okay. So when we have classes upstairs, they are to the age of 8 years old. If your kid, particularly if they're 8 and under, if they're upstairs, they need to be in one of those classes. They cannot be upstairs, hanging around in the hallway and just in different rooms and whatnot. So please keep this in mind. Please make sure if they're over 8 years old, they really should be here. They should be here in the majlis. If they do need to be upstairs for a particular reason, please go upstairs with them so they're not unattended. Again, this is in the interest of safety. This is our next generation. They're the most precious to us. And we want to make sure that they have the best experience at Yasin, a safe experience. Salawat. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. So, alhamdulillah, being the last Friday of Ramadan, we know it as Yom al-Quds. And our beloved brother, Ali Abu Ghaida, has put together a presentation on Quds for us. So everyone, please go ahead and welcome him with a loud salawat.
صلوا على محمد وآل محمد اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد وعجل فرجه. Assalamu alaikum everyone. Alaikum assalam. Thank you, Brother Dawood. Inshallah, as promised, we're going to be doing a short presentation before Sayyid's speech tonight with the permission of Sayyid, inshallah, on International Quds Day. So usually, like what I did last year, instead of giving an overall topic, basically an overall summary, I like to pick specific subjects and then go a little bit more in depth to them. So today I picked to talk about the Zionist plot to destroy Masjid al-Aqsa and build the third temple. It's very relevant right now because currently there is a lot happening in that area of the world. There's a lot of raids, and I'm going to go into that, inshallah. So I'm going to start off, inshallah, by talking about a little bit the history and significance of Masjid al-Aqsa. So Masjid al-Aqsa was originally built by Prophet Ibrahim as a house of worship, like the Kaaba, and it has been destroyed and rebuilt by prophets many times throughout the years. Specifically, for example, Prophet Sulaiman rebuilt it at one point. I'm going to get into that later on. Also, Masjid al-Aqsa, as you all know, is the first Qibla of the Muslims, and it was later changed to the Kaaba. And it's also the site of Al-Isra, which is mentioned in the Holy Quran in Surah Al-Isra, where Prophet Muhammad, instead of, there's the Ma'raj, which is in ascension. This one is a lateral transfer from Masjid al-Haram to Masjid al-Aqsa. And according to traditions, he led a prayer in front of Angel Jibreel as well as many of the prophets. So definitely has a lot of Islamic significance to us. Also, the Ahlul Bayt have spoken about it. For example, there's a hadith from Imam Ali. He says the salah in Bayt al-Maqdis is equal to 1,000 salah in another location. So now, as I said, it was destroyed several times throughout history. Prophet Sulaiman rebuilt it in the year 957 BC, and this was known as the first temple, and it was later destroyed by King Nebuchadnezzar in 586, and then it was rebuilt, which became the second temple when King Cyrus allowed the Jews back to Jerusalem, and again it was destroyed in the year 70 AC by the Romans. So this history is important for the ideology that came about from this. So now the claim is that there's a plan to destroy Masjid al-Aqsa as well as Masjid al-Sakhra and build the Jewish third temple. I just want to mention real quick, in this picture, the one in the yellow box is Masjid al-Sakhra and the one in the red box is Masjid al-Aqsa. Both of them have Islamic significance. Okay, so where did this ideology come from? I spoke about this and I actually showed this slide a year ago. This is also relevant. This is kind of the rabbi that came up with the ideology that eventually became what is known as Zionism. So in the 1800s, he came up with this idea that in order for Jewish prophecy to come about, that the Jewish Messiah or the Mashiach comes back, the Jews need to occupy Palestine, and then also he mentioned build the third temple. And he was actually backed by rich Jewish bankers, including, for example, the Rothschild family. So long story short, this is another rabbi, but he's very anti-Zionist. He's a well-known anti-Zionist Jew. His name is David Weiss. And he's basically said that we don't accept Kalischer's view. And he actually said during the time of Kalischer, he was rejected. And instead, he believes that as long as other Orthodox Jews, they believe that the Jews are even not allowed to go on the Temple Mount until the Messiah comes. Okay. Long story short, today's Zionists have adopted this ideology. So now let's go over the history. So there's a temple activist movement. So this is General Shlomo Goren, and in 1967, after the Six-Day War, he created this organization called the Temple Activist Movement, and they raided the Temple Mount, which contains Masjid al-Aqsa. This was in 1967. Also want to mention, last year I mentioned the three terror groups that eventually became the IDF. The two more extreme ones, the Irgun and the Stern Gang, actually made up the adherents of this temple activist movement. And what ended up happening was they raided it, and he actually mentioned, Goren said he wanted to blow up Masjid al-Aqsa and make way for a Jewish third temple. And I just want to mention also, this ideology is both followed by the Jews who follow Kalischer's teachings, the religious Jews, quote unquote, as well as those who are secular, some even atheists. The atheists, they basically see this as a way to impose Jewish culture and heritage and replace the Islamic heritage in Palestine. So he was not a nobody, basically. He was very high up in the Israeli government. This is a picture of Menachem Begin bowing down to him. Menachem Begin was the leader of the Irgun. And he was actually the liaison between President Ronald Reagan and Begin. And the reason why this is significant is because many American evangelical Christians, they're Zionists because they believe that in order for their Messiah to come back, the Jewish Messiah needs to come back first, who they consider the Antichrist. And how does that happen? The Jews need to occupy Palestine and create the third temple. So it's a bit of an alliance with different motives at the end of the day. And this is a picture, it's a rare picture over here on the right, where he raided Masjid al-Sakhra. This is a picture of him inside. And both him as well as Menachem Begin believe in the Greater Israel Project. You could see that in the top left. Oh, yeah.
May I mention something about the evangelical Christians? Because I talked to many of them, and they seem to believe that after their prophecy is fulfilled, all the Jews will either be slaughtered or forcibly converted to Christianity.
Yeah. Yeah, that's correct. So the alliance that they have is a temporary one because there's major differences in their ideology. That's one of them, what's going to happen in the end times after the Messiah returns. Yes, thank you. Okay, so moving on, there's also another organization that came about by this individual who was part of the raid in 1967, and his name is Gershon Solomon. He created the Temple Mount Faithful movement, and also his organization was made up of Irgun and Stern Gang members. And this is actually from the website. It currently exists right now. I just copy-pasted this from the website. It says that Gershon Solomon dedicated himself to the vision of consecrating the Temple Mount in the name of God to removing the Muslim shrines placed there as a symbol of Muslim conquest, to the rebuilding of the third temple on the Temple Mount and the godly redemption of the people in the land of Israel. So very clearly stated, this is the goal. Now there's another group that came about. This one had a more extreme approach, and they wanted to directly destroy Masjid al-Aqsa. So at one point, this individual, Yehuda Etzion, he tried to plant explosives and blow up Masjid al-Aqsa, and he was arrested before that. And I just want to mention the reason why he was arrested. This has happened in Israeli history, is that there's differences of opinion among the politicians in Israel as to what strategy they should use. But at the end of the day, there's a lot of similarity with what their end goal is. Long story short, he was freed after 5 years in prison, and when he got out, he created a group called the Alive and Existing Movement in order to do da'wah, if you will, for this whole concept of destroying Masjid al-Aqsa and replacing it with a third temple. And he's actually a revered figure among those who have this ideology. Okay, so then there was a disagreement, and another group came about, the Temple Institute. Now this one's important because it exists today. And this one is the most active today. It was created by Rabbi Yisrael Ariel, and it's because they had a disagreement internally. And he was also one of the people who raided the Temple Mount in 1967 with Shlomo Goren. So currently, this organization exists, and they're preparing for this so-called Third Temple. So they have a museum currently in occupied Palestine. They have a menorah worth $1.3 million that they want to put there once it's created. They have a bunch of scrolls and all these and different cornerstones of the actual temple. So this is very open stuff. And it's also funded by the government, this museum and this initiative. It's openly funded by the Israeli government. Okay, so I want to mention this. This one is pretty important. It's a sneak peek into the ideology that creates this goal to destroy Masjid al-Aqsa. So this is a leaked video that came out in 2015 of this individual, Rabbi Yisrael Ariel. And I'm going to read some of the recording exists. I'm just going to read some of them. So he basically said, he was quoting Maimonides, who was a 12th century Jewish sage, and he said, they meaning non-Jews, must agree to follow the 7 Noahide laws. If not, you kill all of their males by sword. I'm going to get into what the Noahide laws are. We will conquer Iraq, Turkey. We will get to Iran too. We will impose the 7 Noahide laws on all of these places. You say, I call upon you in peace. If they raise the flag of surrender and say, from now on, there is no more Christianity, no more Islam, the mosques and the Christian spires and their crosses come down, from now on, we will follow the 7 Noahide laws. All of the Christians are classified as idol worshippers. Muslims are too. None of them showed up here, for example, and said, I agree to follow the 7 laws. This recording exists. No one denies that it exists either. Okay, so now I want to get into what is this whole concept of the 7 Noahide laws. So let's go through them real quick. So do not worship idols. Okay, do not blaspheme God's name. Do not murder. Do not have immoral marriages or relationships. Do not steal. Do not eat meat of an animal that's still alive, and pursue justice. So right off the bat, I heard some laughter a little bit. There's some irony here. So let's go over 3 pieces of irony. First one, Zionists are in no position to lecture others about murder, theft, and justice. That's first of all. Second of all, Islam already practices these laws. These are basic. Of course, every Muslim is going to agree with all 7 of these. These are very basic. And the third irony, which I want to focus a little bit more on, is that Jewish scripture claims that the prophets of God broke these 7 Noahide laws. And the reason why I'm mentioning this is I feel like this has a large influence on this eventual ideology of Zionism. But looking into this further, And let me give some examples. Even the first one, belief in God, even that the prophets, according to the fabrications in the Old Testament, they did not follow this. So, for example, in the Old Testament, it says that Prophet Sulaiman worshipped 4 idols at the end of his life. Prophet Sulaiman, this is the verse. In his old age, his wives tempted him to follow other gods. He was no longer committed to his Lord or to the Lord, his God, as his father David had been. Also, it's actually pretty ironic because in the Old Testament, there's a lot of crimes. I don't even want to mention them from the minbar out of respect for Prophet David, but very, very terrible crimes committed by Prophet Dawood in these scriptures. Also, the Quran answers this. It says in Surah Baqarah, ayah 102, and they followed what the devils pursued during Solomon's reign, and Sulaiman did not commit kufr. Rather, it was the devils who committed kufr. And there's more to this. Imam al-Rida has an explanation of what this means and what exactly happened. It's in Tafsir al-Mizan if you're interested. So why am I presenting this? So these fabricated slanders against these divine representatives, it's really hard to argue against the fact that this is played a large part in this ideology of Zionism. But this is actually a universal concept that happens with, it's happened throughout history with all the Abrahamian religions. So let's go through some of them. So in Judaism, the idea that the prophets were sinners diluted their message of piety such that the covenant of the Jews with God to worship and obey him and ultimately become ambassadors for his teachings to the nations of the world has turned into a supremacist ideology where basically God preferred them over everyone else, and it's unconditional. In Christianity, the concept of original sin based on the idea that Prophet Adam, his sin was inherited by all of mankind. There's a concept that men are inherently sinners. And since they're inherently sinners, the only way we could be saved is that we just believe that Jesus Christ died for our sins and we're good. So what happens is that mainstream Christianity has become purely belief-based as opposed to belief and action-based. And even in Islam, unfortunately, this has also occurred. There have been slanders against Holy Prophet. I believe Sayyid mentioned this year in his speeches. Slanders against the Holy Prophet were introduced by the Umayyads to justify their own crimes and depravity. And these slanders made the fabricated hadith saying that you have to follow even an unjust ruler more palatable by the Muslims. And eventually you had Yazid becoming the Khalifa. So I just wanted to give some examples that among all the Abrahamian religions, this concept of slandering the prophets of God has led to mass deviation of entire civilizations. And it's my personal opinion that that plays a large role in the eventual birth of Zionism. So now let's move on. So I just want to make sure no one thinks that this is not just a fringe group. The government in Israel is heavily involved with this whole concept of destroying Masjid al-Aqsa and building the third temple. So this is a list of different Israeli politicians. I actually had a bunch of slides with quotes and pictures, but the presentation would be too long, so I put just a list here. So, for example, the Minister of Culture, Minister of Transportation, Minister of Construction, Minister of Foreign Affairs, Minister of Justice, Minister of Science. So all of them have made very, very clear statements that they have this as a goal, the destruction of Masjid al-Aqsa and the building of the third temple. This is a picture, like for example, in the top left, Netanyahu is at a conference and he has a photoshopped picture of Masjid al-Aqsa is removed and the third temple is there. On the bottom picture, there's a picture that they showed to children in school where they photoshopped Masjid al-Aqsa out. This is the U.S. ambassador to Israel, and he's basically showing a picture where Masjid al-Aqsa is photoshopped out, and instead there's a temple. And the U.S. State Department even released a video that was publicizing Pompeo's visit to Jerusalem. This is during the time when they were making Jerusalem the capital. And they show a model of the third temple. Furthermore, they also like to introduce this into their children. So, like we teach our children about Imam Mahdi, and they do very nice presentations here. What they do is they teach these concepts of the third temple to children. This is a book that was made, and it's actually presented to children in schools. So I don't know if maybe some of you have seen this video. It's a 1-minute video, and it's basically showing children inside class, right? And they start being interviewed by the teacher, and the answers are very interesting. I'm going to read them, but I recommend you guys watch the video. So the teacher says, "Who believes the holy temple will be built in the next few years?" So the kids raise their hand. "What's currently in place of the temple?" The students say, "The mosque, Al-Aqsa Mosque." Teacher, "What will happen to Al-Aqsa Mosque?" The students say, "It will be destroyed, it will disappear." The teacher then says, "What happens when you meet an Arab kid? What do you feel?" Some of the students said, "Anger. I feel like I want to kill him." The teacher then says, "What do you think Jerusalem will look like 10 years from now?" The students say, it will be full of Jews, but there will be Arabs who will be slaves for us." And then the teacher says, "The Messiah will come, right?" And they say, "There will be a big war, and the Arabs will die, and some of them will become slaves for us." Okay. So it's really good this video exists, because otherwise, as Muslims, how would we know that our purpose of existence is to be slaves to these third graders? But jokes aside, this really shows that these concepts of hatred that have nothing to do with religion, it's based on supremacy. They're taught at a very young age, and this causes a lot of issue, because a lot of the violence against the Palestinians comes from the settlers who grew up on these kind of concepts. So now the last thing I wanted to present is what's the reality on the ground, what comes about from this ideology. So it's the storming of the Temple Mount where Masjid al-Aqsa sits. So the Al-Aqsa massacre happened in 1990, where the Temple Mount faithful, which I mentioned, wanted to put a cornerstone there, and they caused a whole commotion, and then Israeli police killed over 20 Palestinians and wounded 150 more. And later on, Benjamin Netanyahu colluded with the same temple groups to start building tunnels under Masjid al-Aqsa. And this significantly puts the structural integrity of the masjid in peril. Then the butcher, Ariel Sharon, he went to the Temple Mount, he stormed the Temple Mount in 2000, and someone from his party basically said the reason this was done was to show that under the Likud government, it is the Temple Mount will remain under Israeli sovereignty. It happened again in 2017. 25,000 Zionists stormed the compound, and they are always accompanied by both Israeli police and Israeli soldiers. So they're actually helping these settlers storm the masjid and storm the site as well as the masjid. 2009, same thing happened. They started pepper spraying people, shooting rubber bullets at them. And then someone from the Israeli government said we should do everything in our ability to keep ascending to the Temple Mount. 2021, they entered the masjid. This is them inside the masjid. The smoke is from smoke grenades. Outside the masjid, they started beating people up. And at least 300 Palestinians were injured in this. 2022, last year, inside the masjid, there's stun grenades being thrown inside the masjid, smoke grenades. 500 worshippers were arrested, and then 150 of them were injured. You could see that, that's in the main hall of the masjid. And this year, same thing happened. So it's actually only growing. Every year, it just increases. So far, 400 Palestinian worshippers have been arrested. Many have been injured as well. So the conclusion, just as a summary, the Zionist beliefs of destroying Masjid al-Aqsa and Masjid al-Sakhra are mainstream both among Israeli politicians as well as settlers, posing a serious risk to these significant Islamic religious sites. Number two, for many years it has been a policy of the Israeli regime to facilitate violent raids of Masjid al-Aqsa in which Palestinians are arrested, injured, and killed. And number three, the only reason the Zionists have not yet destroyed Masjid al-Aqsa is due to the fear of backlash from Muslims around the world. And this is very important because it has to do with what our part is. First of all, boycotting an Israeli regime in any way is very important to do, inshallah. Becoming informed about this history of this regime as well as the current developments that are happening, and spreading awareness of this, because this is something that is not in the interest of Israel, and they spend a lot of money and time and effort and resources in order to spread their false propaganda through different people on the internet and putting comments and so on and so forth, inviting celebrities. So being able to spread the awareness of what is happening, first and foremost among Muslims, so they know what's happening to their Islamic sites, and inshallah khair in the future. Thank you so much for Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. thank you for giving me the chance to do this short presentation. And of course, thank you, Sayed. Sorry, maybe I went a little bit over time. So now just a few announcements, inshallah, before we invite Sayed over. We'll keep it light today. I believe there is a children's program, if I'm not mistaken, right? No children's program? Okay. They keep changing it. No, I'm just kidding. Okay, so no children's program today. And, we still are accepting donations. Ramadan still has several days left. Inshallah, we would love to have those donations if you have them. Thank you so much. And inshallah, please help me invite Sayyid with a loud salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Sorry, I misspoke. I think it's dua iftitah next. Sorry about that. My bad. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad.
Start right now.
Yeah. I think if you could ask them for a salawat.
صلوا على محمد وآل محمد. اللهم صل على بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. اللهم إني أفتتح الثناء بحمدك، وأنت مسدد للصواب بمنك، وأيقنت أنك أنت أرحم الراحمين في موضع العفو والرحمة، وأشد المعاقبين في موضع النكال والنكمة، وأعظم المتجبرين في موضع الكبرياء والعظمة. اللهم أعظمت لي في دعائك ومسألتك، فاسمع يا سميع مدحتي، وأجب يا رحيم دعوتي، وأقل يا غفور عثرتي. فكم يا إلهي من كربة قد فرجتها، وهموم قد كشفتها، وعثرة قد أقلتها، ورحمة قد نشرتها، وحلكة بلاء قد فككتها. الحمد لله الذي لم يتخذ صاحبة ولا ولدا، ولم يكن له شريك في الملك، ولم يكن له ولي من الذل، وكبره تكبيرا. الحمد لله بجميع محامده كلها، على جميع نعمه كلها. الحمد لله الذي لا مضاد له في ملكه، ولا منازع له في أمره. الحمد لله الذي لا شريك له في خلقه، ولا شبيه له في عظمته. الحمد لله فاشي في خلق أمره وحمده، الظاهر بالكرم مجده، الباسط بالجود يداه، الذي لا تنقص خزائنه، ولا تزيده كثرة العطاء إلا جودا وكرما. إنه هو العزيز الوهاب. اللهم إني أسألك قليلا من كثير مع حاجة به إليه عظيما، وغناك عنه قديم، وهو عندي كثير، وهو عليك سهل يسير. اللهم إن عفوك عن ذنبي، وتجاوزك عن خطيئتي، وصفحك عن ظلمي، وسترك على قبيح عملي، وحلمك عن كثير جرمي، عندما كان من خطئي وعمدي. أتمعني في أن أسألك ما لا أستوجبه منك، الذي رزقتني من رحمتك، وأريتني من قدرتك، وعرفتني من إجابتك، فصرت أدعوك آمنا، وأسألك مستأنسا، لا خائفا ولا وجلا، مضلا عليك فيما قصدت فيه إليك. فإن عبت عني أتبت بجهلي عليك، ولعل الذي نعبت عني هو خير لي، لعلمك بعاقبة الأمور. فلم أر مولا كريما أصبر على عبد لعيم منك علي، يا ربي إنك تدعوني فأولي عنك، وتتحبب إلي فأتبغض إليك، وتتودد إلي فلا أقبل منك. كأن لي التطول عليك فلم يمنعك ذلك من الرحمة لي والإحسان إليك والتفضل علي بجودك وكرمك. فارحم عبدك الجاهل وجد عليه بفضل إحسانك. إنك جواد كريم. الحمد لله مالك الملك مجري الفلك مسخر الرياح فالق الإصباح ديان الدين رب العالمين. الحمد لله على حلمه بعد علمه، والحمد لله على عفوه بعد قدرته، والحمد لله على طول أناته في غضبه، وهو قادر على ما يريد. الحمد لله خالق الخلق باسط الرزق فالق الإصباح ذي الجلال والإكرام والفضل والإنعام، الذي بعضا فلا يرى وقربا فشهد النجوى تبارك وتعالى. الحمد لله الذي ليس له منازع يعادله، ولا شبيه يشاكله، ولا ظهير يعاضده. قهر بعزته الأعزة وتواضع لعظمته العظمى، فبلغ بقدرته ما يشاء. الحمد لله الذي يجيبني حين أنادي، ويستر علي كل عورة وأنا عاصي، ويؤذم النعمة علي فلا أجازي. فكم من موهبة هنيئة قد أعطاني، وعظيمة مخوفة قد كفاني، وبهجة مونقة قد أراني، فأثني عليه حامدا وأذكره مسبحا. الحمد لله الذي لا يحتك حجابه، ولا يغلق بابه، ولا يرد السائل، ولا يخيب آمل. الحمد لله الذي يؤمن الخائفين وينجي الصالحين، ويرفع المستضعفين ويضع المستكبرين، ويهلك ملوكا ويستخلف آخرين. والحمد لله قاصم الجبارين مبير الظالمين مدرك الحاربين نكال الظالمين صريخ المستصرخين موضع حاجات الطالبين، وهو على كل شيء قدير. اللهم صل على محمد عبدك ورسولك وأمينك وصفيك وحبيبك وخيرتك من خلقك وحافظ سرك ومبلغ رسالاتك، أفضل وأحسن وأجمل وأكمل وأزكى وأنمى وأطيب وأطهر وأسنى وأكثر ما صليت وباركت وترحمت وتحننت وسلمت على عهد من عبادك وأنبيائك ورسلك وصفوتك وأحلى الكرامة عليك من خلقك. اللهم وصل على علي أمير المؤمنين ووصي رسول رب العالمين، عبدك ووليك وأخي رسولك وحجتك على خلقك وآيتك الكبرى والنبأ العظيم. وصل على صديقة الطاهرة فاطمة سيدة النساء العالمين، وصل على صبطي الرحمة وإمامي الهدى الحسن والحسين سيدا شباب أهل الجنة. وصل على أئمة المسلمين علي بن الحسين ومحمد بن علي وجعفر بن محمد وموسى بن جعفر وعلي بن موسى ومحمد بن علي وعلي بن محمد والحسن بن علي والخلف الهادي المهدي، حججك على عبادك وأمنائك في بلادك، صلاة كثيرة دائمة. اللهم وصل على ولي أمرك القائم المؤمل والعدل المنتظر، وحفه بملائكتك المقربين، وأيده بروح القدس يا رب العالمين. اللهم اجعله الداعي إلى كتابك والقائم بدينك، استخلفه في الأرض كما استخلفت الذين من قبله، مكن له دينه الذي ارتضيته له، أبدله من بعد خوفه أمنا، يعبدك لا يشرك بك شيئا. اللهم أعزه وأعزز به، وانصره وانتصر به، وانصره نصرا عزيزا، وافتح له فتحا يسيرا، واجعل له من لدنك سلطانا نصيرا. اللهم أظهر به دينك وسنة نبيك حتى لا يستخفي بشيء من الحق مخافة أحد من الخلق. اللهم إنا نرغب إليك في دولة كريمة تعز بها الإسلام وأهله، وتذل بها النفاق وأهله، وتجعلنا فيها من الدعاة إلى طاعتك والقادة إلى سبيلك، وترزقنا بها كرامة الدنيا والآخرة. اللهم ما عرفتنا من الحق فحملنا، وما قصرنا عنه فبلغنا. اللهم المم به شأثنا، واشعب به صدعنا، وارتق به فتقنا، وكثر به قلتنا، وأعزز به ذلتنا، وأغن به عائلنا، واقض به عن مغرمنا، واجبر به فقرنا، وسد به خلتنا، وبيض به وجوهنا، وبيض به وجوهنا، وفك به أسرنا، وأنجئ به طلبتنا، وأنجز به مواعيدنا، واستجب به دعوتنا، وآتنا به سؤلنا، وبلغنا به من الدنيا والآخرة آمالنا، وآتنا به فوق رغبتنا يا خير المسؤولين وأوسع المعطين. اشف به صدورنا، واذهب به غيظ قلوبنا، واهدنا به لما اختلف فيه من الحق بإذنك، إنك تهدي من تشاء إلى صراط مستقيم. وانصرنا به على عدوك وعدونا إله الحق، آمين. اللهم إنا نشكو إليك فقد نبينا صلواتك عليه وآله، وغيبة ولينا، وكثرة عدونا، وقلة عددنا، وشدة الفتن بنا، وتظاهر الزمان علينا. فصل على محمد وآله، وأعنا على ذلك بفتح منك تعجل، وبذر تكشف، ونصر تعز، وسلطان حق تظهر، ورحمة منك تجللناها، وعافية منك تلبسناها، برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. إذا الأموات الحاضرين ومن مات على الإيمان، سورة المباركة الفاتحة مع الصلاة على محمد وآل محمد.
صلوا على محمد وآل محمد. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد وعجل فرجهم. Okay, inshallah, without further ado, please help me invite Sayyid Abbas with a loud salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad.
I have a couple. If you don't.
صلوا على محمد وآل محمد.
اللهم صل على محمد. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين، والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين سيدنا ومولانا أبي القاسم المصطفى محمد. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد وعلى أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين، ولعنة الله على أعدائهم إلى قيام يوم الدين. تقبل Allah, inshallah, your acts of worship, especially last night. Must feel great to truly believe that God has forgiven us and that we are now, just as a child is born, we are in that same way pure. And we said last night that do not think that these actions that we do, these a'mal and du'as, thank you so much, that you have to do all of them in order to attain forgiveness. The fact that you have that intention for God to forgive you and you feel ashamed for what you did, God forgives. The main thing is the next day, now that you're forgiven, the next day, are you going to repeat what you did before? So that forgiveness is easy. And actually that tawbah and coming back to God is something that He changes those sayyat into hasanat. He changes the evil deeds that, if God forbid, someone did before, He changes it into good deeds. It's actually a miracle by itself. How merciful is God that He changes the evil to good. We're talking about serious topics, and that is the grave, death, what we see during death. And we said that death in the living in the grave is called barzakh, purgatory, a place which is not necessarily heaven and hell yet, but it is also not this world. It's something in between. It's a barrier. And we said that that becomes for that good person like heaven, rawdatun min riyad al-jannah, will become a sample of heaven for them. And we said that for those that will enter hellfire, it will be a sample of hellfire for them. But regardless, we said from the traditions that we are warned of the grave, because the grave is a place of refinement, a place where we will be cleansed, clean, so that we can enter heaven. And we talked about this theological concept of tajassumul a'mal, the embodiment of action. Even though there are some ulama that do not accept it, or they say, for example, it is not exactly that action because that action is only in this world. How can that action go to the next world? But the majority, at least of the contemporary ulama, they accept it. Of them is, for example, Ayatollah Makaram Shirazi in Tafsir Namuna. He says one of the clear proofs that our actions actually become something. And this topic is, do these actions become something themselves, or embodied? He says the Quran is very clear, and that is فَمَنْ يَعْمَلْ مِثْقَالَ ذَرَّةٍ خَيْرًا يَرَى. Whoever does an atom's weight of good, yara. Yara means he will see it. It means it will be embodied. He understands that it will become embodied, and you'll see it in the grave. And then the same, وَمَنْ يَعْمَلْ مِثْقَالَ ذَرَّةٍ شَرًّا يَرَى. And whoever does an atom's weight of evil will see it. And they come into different forms. Sometimes, vicious dogs, maybe scorpions, maybe serpents and snakes. And good embodiments of hasanat, for example, a young man, a pleasant person, coming and guiding you and telling you, giving you information of good news, and always comforting you. Actually, there's a nice tradition. It says in the tradition that when this happens to the believer, that in the tradition it says that actually this good news, a person, Imam Sadiq alayhi salam mentions a good person in their grave, and they're always comforting them, giving them good news at a time when a person in the grave doesn't know what's going to happen, is afraid. And then in the tradition, he says this, he says, أَنَا السُّرُورُ الَّذِي كُنْتَ أَدْخَلْتَ عَلَى أَخِيكَ الْمُؤْمِنِ. I am that happiness that you caused for your brother. I'm that. So they understood, the ulama, that this is actually, it is that reality, embodiment of that surur. Surur means happiness. You helped your brother in Islam out. The sister helped the sister in Islam out. And what happened? It manifested himself into a very comforting person that causes surur in the grave. Some take surur to mean just happiness and jokes, because there are narrations of idkhal as-surur, bringing happiness for the brother. They think that, okay, I'm going to give a joke everyone, and I'm going to do idkhal as-surur. And they say it has thawab and lots. And is that necessarily just cracking jokes? If so, I have some jokes I'll tell you afterwards about Shahr Ramadan. I won't say it now. But I have some idkhal as-surur jokes. Remind me and I'll tell you. But it's higher than that. Idkhal as-surur, as our teacher Shaykh Ahmad Mujtahidi would say, is look, someone has problems in their life. They're trying to resolve something. You come and you help them out, and you cause a smile on their face. You cause surur because you come and visit, say, one of your friends, brothers, family members. They have financial difficulty. They need help in a matter. You help them out. You guide them to the answer, to the solution of the problem. They become happy. Because whenever someone's problem is removed, they become happy. That's the true example you can say of idkhal as-surur. So in this narration very clearly, أَنَا السُّرُورَ الَّذِي كُنْتَ أَدْخَلْتَ عَلَى أَخِيكَ الْمُؤْمِنِ. I'm that happiness. So dear brother, dear sister, in Shahr Ramadan, remember, if you cause happiness, you do something nice to someone else, they're in help, because we all go through problems, difficulties, you will see that in the hereafter. And in the same way, if you do dhulm, and we also have in the same narration that dhulm could be, for example, dhalama, or it can be other things, for example. Let me see if I can find the tradition here. Let's recite salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. اتقوا الظلم فإنه ظلمات يوم القيامة. Separate yourselves, guard against dhulm and oppression, because it is darkness in the day of judgment. So you see that our actions will manifest themselves, and they'll become just like how the reality of that batin, of that action is, and we'll see it. The Prophet of Islam in Mi'raj, there's an interesting hadith, that when he did Mi'raj and many realities for him became apparent, he saw a few different groups in Mi'raj. The first group he saw was a group of people that they had clean meat in front of them, but they abandoned the clean meat and chose the dirty meat, unclean meat, filthy meat. And he inquires about it, and he's told that in the world there was, for example, halal meat, there's halal food. And instead of choosing the halal, it was existed. Alhamdulillah, today it's very easy to go and buy. Inshallah it is halal, but that's, but as long as from a Muslim, it's fine. You assume it's halal. But they abandoned that easy. You go, to this Muslim, store, this place, and you buy some meat, it's halal. And they abandoned that in this world, and they would go and buy haram meat and consume haram meat. In the hereafter, in Mi'raj, Rasulullah sees they're eating that filthy meat, that impure meat. So exactly what they did here, they're doing in the hereafter. Or you see, for example, in the other group of people that they are biting themselves, consuming themselves. How terrible is that for a person to eat themselves? And the answer is they used to mock and make fun and find faults of others. So now they're mocking themselves. Now they're eating themselves. Something funny, for example. So this is a reality. The Prophet of Islam is saying this. Brothers and sisters, the entire purpose of these things is not so, I can scare you so less people come here so I can have more iftar for myself. That's not the purpose of this. The purpose is so that we understand that religion teaches us to be accountable of what we do, how we treat others. Because spirituality does not do that. Just spirituality without religion, there is no push for me to be very careful of others, to be very, very careful of my actions. In religion, and especially in the religion of Islam, where not only is just faith salvation, faith alone in Islam is not salvation. This is the entire point of this, is that you need faith and you need good actions. You need to correct the truth. You need to find the truth, discover the truth, believe in it, and also act upon it. You can't just say, I believe and nothing will happen to me, khalas, I go to heaven. And you don't believe, you go to hell even if you're the greatest person. We don't say that. So it's these two things that you're very careful of how you act. Because that Adam's weight, you will see it. The third group, we'll make it a little bit shorter tonight. The third group is there's those that they would take their faces and smash it on the rocks. They would see their heads and they would smash it on rocks. And he was told that they were the people that would not pay attention to salat. They would not. Imagine, the most important thing, and a person would hit himself in the head because I forgot Mi'raj al-Mu'min, Hayya ala khayr al-amal, the best of actions. So protect your salat in Shahr Ramadan, and I'm telling myself, protect your salat wherever you go. You're traveling, you don't feel like praying, you're with a group of people, they think of you weird, you're at work, it's becoming qada, for example, protect that prayer. Salat is those that yuqimuna as-salat, they establish prayer wherever they are. Not they pray whenever they're at home. That's not yuqimuna as-salat. Yuqimuna as-salat is they play in the airplane, they play in the airport, they play at work, they pray at work. They pray wherever they are. Everywhere they can do sajda of Allah. They don't allow that sun to set intentionally, and they didn't do this. For example, there's dhuhrain or asrain or whatever. The last group of people, and these are the worst probably of these, are these sins that sometimes it can happen, but it is maybe farther from us, and that is consuming the money of the orphans. And the Quran mentions this too, that is fire. The Quran very clear says, إِنَّ الَّذِينَ يَأْكُلُونَ أَمْوَالَ الْيَتَامَى ظُلْمًا إِنَّمَا يَأْكُلُونَ فِي بُطُونِهِمْ نَارًا. They're the ones that are eating fire. And Rasulullah sees that in Mi'raj. Why the orphans? Because a lot of times when someone passes away, this can happen too, that orphan has right to their estate of their father or mother, parents or others. Now, orphan obviously is parents. So people take advantage of that money because they left it with them, or maybe they don't know what to do with it. And they use it for themselves. And that orphan is small. They don't know. Maybe they're 5 years of age, 6 years of age, 10 years of age. They don't know. That's their money, and you're consuming it without permission. That's why sometimes our teacher, Sheikh Ahmad Mujtahidi, would say, this doesn't apply here necessarily. Say this was in Iran. If there's a funeral that I know that there are saghir, that there are orphans, for example, someone that died and they have estate, if they give food in the funeral, it says, as ihtiyat, I wouldn't eat. Because I give the chance, this is not for you, but I give the chance that is money from the mayyit, the dead person, and that's actually their inheritance. And how do you know that the orphans are satisfied with, for example, them spending their money to give everybody, for example, a great lunch or dinner or something? So that's their money. Of course, if they put it aside or they do wasiyat, that's something else. But it's so particular that you have to spend the money of the orphan, the wali, the qayyim, has to spend it on the maslahat and what's beneficial for the orphan. Whoever has walayat over them, usually say the father who has walayat, after the father passes away, the father's father, they spend it for things that are beneficial for them. They can't just spend it for anything. It has to be in the benefit of that saghir, that person that's young. So you see, in these cases of Mi'raj, that Rasulullah sees these things, and these are cases of people not either performing their salat, not eating halal, for example, or taking the rights of others, or mocking and making fun of others, and they see it a very, embodiment, a very disgusting embodiment. We have other traditions that talk about tajassum al-a'mal, for example, a tradition from Imam Sadiq alayhi salam, I mentioned that one, or other traditions from Imam Sadiq. فَإِنَّ الصَّدَقَةُ تُضِلُّ. The Imam says that sadaqah is shade. Sadaqah is shade for us. It's a protection from that time period where people will be left out. It'll be protecting us. It'll be shade. Why? Because it becomes tajassum. You'll see it itself. There's another tradition I'm going to say about this section and end it, and we're going to maybe end earlier tonight. When a person dies, another tradition from Imam Sadiq alayhi salam, there are 6 surah or embodiments that come and protect that person from evil. 6 things come from different sides. Say one is from the right, the left, the front, behind, the bottom, and on top of the head. They protect this person. And they say that these are khair, these are good actions. They don't allow those evils. So sometimes you have in the grave as well, or the embodiment of good actions protecting, especially when they're strong actions, protecting from the evil actions. And in the tradition it has, for example, on the right side will be salat. On the left side will be zakat. In front of them will be fasting. All of these are embodied and protect that person. Behind them will be hajj. Say, another part will be ihsan and doing good to others. Then there's this part that is right by the head. And obviously the head is the most important part. What do you think what action this is? From all these actions I mentioned, from salat, zakat, saum, hajj, ihsan, is there anything we left out that's going to protect? Walayat. And the tradition has this about walayat, that ana al-walay, they ask, what is this, who is this embodiment that you're protecting my head? Ana al-walaya la'ali Muhammad. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ala. In the book of Mahasin al-Barqi. Mahasin al-Barqi is an old book. It's even older than Al-Kafi, I believe. So walayat, just how when a person follows Ahlul Bayt for direction and guidance, you can say, just how salat and zakat protected them, but that walayat and authority of the Prophet and Ahlul Bayt give direct direction. The head is the part that goes first, obviously, right? So they give direction to us, and that is why it is the most important, because it's a clear example of what to do. The sunnah of the Prophet, the sunnah of the Imams, that salvation that we get, that guidance that we have from the Imams, especially those that lived during the time of a physical Imam present, they would say, go, and they would go. Have peace, and there would be peace. It'd be very easy. It wasn't complicated. All you have to do is just follow. When they came to Imam Ali alayhi salam, many people, they gave bay'at to him after, about 25 years that Imam Ali was left alone. They came to him finally and says, we want you to lead. So we figure that, these are good people. They came to him. Then the first test came, and it was the Battle of Jamal. And all those people that says, Imam Ali, we want you to lead, Imam Ali, we want you to lead, were tested. And some of them, like Talha and Zubayr, failed, and they followed the other side and became enemies. Same people that did bay'ah. Because some at the beginning didn't do bay'ah. Like say, the Abdullah bin Umar, the son of Umar, for example, didn't do bay'ah to Imam Ali alayhi salam. But those that did, there are a lot. Then they get tested, the wilayat gets tested, and then they leave. They follow, the other camp in Yemen. Then Siffin happens, another leave, for example, group leaves. Then the battle of Nahrawan, Siffin was with Muawiyah, by the way. Then the battle of, for example, Nahrawan happens, And then another group leave because of different, ideologies. So test it and test it and test it to see who really follows Amir al-Mu'mineen alayhi salam. And who's going to be like Maytham, for example, Maytham at-Tammar for him, or Malik, who later on passed away, but like Malik and the likes of them, Sa'a, or different Habib ibn Amr and different companions of Imam Ali alayhi salam. So this walayat that we say is actually in reality something that you have to really strive for, to learn, to respect, and to submit to that walayat. Or else it's not just a love, just to say, oh, I have love of Imam Ali. I said, well, what if that love is tested? Just like the Battle of Jamal, it was tested, just like in Siffin, it was tested, just in Nahrawan, it was tested. And how many will be left for Imam Ali that at the end, Imam Hassan has to hide the holy body of Imam Ali alayhi salam, has to hide it, so people will not know where he's buried. That Imam Hassan alayhi salam, few months he could only rule and forced to have a peace treaty with Muawiyah. Multiple assassination attempts that finally he had to hide in Madain, a place where Salman al-Farsi used to be the governor. So you see that Allah tests us with these things, especially the most important, which is walayat, and you see that tajassum, that walayat will come and defend you. Over and over you see these traditions. That's why I said in the nights of Qadr, two things: seek forgiveness and sincerely ask help and shafa'at from Rasulullah and his family. That's your greatest protection. That's protecting your head in this narration. There's other tajassum, I'm just going to say briefly. There's tajassum of akhlaq, meaning that the embodiment of your behavior. If you were a liar, if you're a trickster, you become, for example, resembling that. If you had, they said, this is just, take it at face value, an Arif became very angry at his family member, and then he just saw anger, and he saw the reality of his anger, the embodiment of anger. He became so angry, he looked at himself and completely, came very fast to this family member and asked for forgiveness. Why? Because he saw that tajassum. So in the reality, maybe we've seen narrations that the Imams show people as, for example, animals, like dogs, like pigs, and there are narrations, and instructions like that. A person becomes like that akhlaq that they have. They become like a bear, they become like a pig, like that trait. And some of the ulama would see it in this world. God forbid. One of the scholars would do ziyarat of Imam Ali alayhi salam, and he would walk very slowly to do ziyarat of Imam Ali in Najaf, but then when he would do ziyarat, he would rush home. And they ask him, why is it you go slow when you visit Imam Ali, but when you want to leave, you go very fast? He says that it opens up. I see people how they are. I see that malakut. I see the batin of people. I see that tajassum of akhlaq, the manifestation of akhlaq. And I see people as animals, as how they really are. Maybe someone's like a fox. Maybe someone's like a bear. Maybe someone's like a pig. So that's another tajassum that you bring with yourself in the hereafter, whatever you have become. That's all it is, whatever you have become. So Shahr Ramadan is a very good chance for us to become very, cleansed and become a human again, inshallah. That's why in the Hawza they say how easy it is to become a mullah, but how hard it is to become an Adam. How easy it is to study and gain knowledge, but how hard it is to become a man and not to have those animalistic traits. So that's tajassumul akhlaq that we have in the hereafter. May God separate us from this, these embodiments, and hopefully we can be of those that have, good manifestations in the hereafter. But the conclusion of today is that, dear brother, dear sister, all that happens is, tujzawna ma kuntum ta'lamun. All that the hereafter, especially the grave, is what we've done in this world. That's all it is. And ya'fu an kathir. Allah will forgive many of it. And He forgives, like not Laylatul Qadr, you have another chance again to start over. But these are the best chances for us to take heed of the day of judgment, of the grave, of the questions of the grave, to do something for ourselves before it's too late. to do something before, whatever you know, do for yourselves this Shahr Ramadan before it's too late. And hopefully you will become of those that will have a beautiful embodiment of yourself, inshallah, in the hereafter. You'll be like those that will have a sweet fragrance of them, because they are the Za'ir and Zawar of Hussein ibn Ali alayhi salam. And they will have a great manifestation in the hereafter. Ya Allah, we ask you to give, inshallah, separate us from the punishments of the grave, inshallah. Let us pass the questioning of the grave. Give us a very beautiful barzakh, inshallah. Make it of heaven for us. Also for our family members and friends that have passed away, give them rahmah and mercy in the grave. Allah, we ask you to help our dear brothers in Palestine, our Muslims all over the world that are oppressed, and to allow, today was the day of Friday, to do ta'jeel of Imam al-Zaman. Make us to be prepared for his uprising and become of his companions, so that justice, goodness, tawheed, and prosperity will fill the world, inshallah. With his salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Oh, Q&A? Is it? Yeah. Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullah. I'm going to have them disconnect. It's gone?